Host of this Freedom Series session for the Comeback Game podcast. Today I'm joined by Dr. Jeff Moody, MD, is a board-certified UCLA trained practitioner urologist and author of The Doctor is Burned Out, A Physician's Guide to Recovery. Jeff, welcome to the show today, mate.
Hey, thanks so much. Thanks for having me. I hope things are well in Western Australia.
I'm actually in Indonesia. Things are incredibly well here. And I understand it's 4 a.m. where you are, so I'm grateful that you've managed to pull yourself out of bed early to be on the show today.
No worries. I'm a surgeon, so we're up at a lot of odd hours. So
yeah, love that. And look, I'd love to, I guess, chat today about the topic of burnout, because although you've written the book for physicians more so, it's something that many people, especially business owners and entrepreneurs who are watching this episode today, wherever they are in the world, are experiencing. Yet something that I think often is we don't actually know when we're experiencing a period of burnout. So if you're watching live today, welcome to the show. Please let us know you're watching by clicking like, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're on Facebook, Instagram, and so forth. Rafi from our team is going to be feeding through your questions, so make sure you ask any of those questions to myself or Dr. Jeff Moody as well. We'll be sure to get them answered and show some support for the conversation this evening. But I guess, how did you transition from being a urologist to writing your own book? Where did that transition happen?
Definitely not an author. I mean, I've written scientific papers and book chapters and things like that, but it's completely different. The thing we were chatting about before we went live is that one of the problems with burnout is I think the vast majority of people don't even realize they have it, and it's very insidious. And same thing happened to me. 5 years ago, I was completely burned out, and all I thought was I was just having a bad day every day for like a year, and then finally, I would say I can't be that smart. I'm a urologist, so it took me a while to figure it out. But finally, there were a few kind of key things that gave me the sign. Finally, that things were not right. And so I learned a lot. I read a lot. I took a lot of action, and I got better. And so I was like, you know what? If I have to go through this. And you start looking at the statistics, more than probably 50% of physicians in the US are burnout. And that's fairly static across the world as well. So I'm sure in Australia, it's 30, 40, 50% plus of physicians are burned out. That if I went through all this, I'm like, good heavens, let's at least write it down. And if one person can find some utility out of this, I'm like, then I feel like, my job is done. I will help someone. And so if we can help someone who's burned out, that was job one. Job two would be, let's maybe help prevent people if they are starting to think, things are not right. I'm like, let's get them on the path before it gets bad. And the bottom line for me is that one physician in the United States every day commits suicide. So we're really trying to prevent that. That's my why.
Yeah. Wow. That's huge. And I've certainly heard those statistics before. I'd be curious to kind of dive into understanding more around what burnout is, and also too, what are some signs and symptoms? Like you mentioned before, you're experiencing bad days, and that went on for a year before you're like, hang on, there's something else going on here. And I've worked with hundreds and thousands of entrepreneurs across the world, and obviously been through a significant journey myself. And there's certainly been times where I've had these prolonged periods, and I've stopped to ask myself questions like, is this depression? Am I just making the wrong decisions? Am I doing the wrong thing in life? And to be honest, even looking back, there was never a thought crossed like, oh, maybe I'm burnt out. Maybe I just need some time off. Because for me, even holidays was me on a beach somewhere with a laptop, listening to audiobooks.
Exactly. Living it up, getting sand in my keyboard,
Yeah, it wasn't a holiday. So I guess I'd love to know, let's start with what is burnout? What do you believe burnout is?
Well, I mean, there's a psychological definition of it, but I think also this because you work with entrepreneurs. I think entrepreneurs are probably the most susceptible to it because they're entrepreneurs, and I think you obviously are an entrepreneur. I feel like physicians, if they're self-employed, are entrepreneurs, but they're very driven, and they're very goal and success oriented. And And sometimes, unless you set your own metric or your own off button, you just keep going. There's no stopping point. There's no level at which you like, okay, that I made it. There's always the next level. So, but the psychiatric definition or psychological definition of burnout is loss of, or a kind of emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and lack of personal achievement. So those basically the way I think of those is I don't care about you, and I don't care that you wrote a bad Google review about me. So I think you kind of start to get almost, you don't have your bucket is empty, so to speak. You don't have anything left to give to someone else emotionally. And also I think there's an element of you become a little callous. You again, with that loss of caring for others. I like to add a couple other things, but I think that's what really feeds into burnout for people is I think there's an element of kind of hopelessness and powerlessness. People think that there's nothing they can do and there's nothing that can change. And so then they feel like they become trapped in their situation. And then burnout, I think one of the issues with burnout is it's very, people present in different ways, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Some people will become angry, like me. I was kind of angry, frustrated when I became burnt out. Some people will get depressed and sad and blue. Some people just get quiet. They get very withdrawn. They withdraw from all their favorite activities. Some people commit suicide. Sometimes that's the first sign. I know personally 5 physicians since I've been in our area that have committed suicide, 2 in the last year. So yeah, it's just, unfortunately, again, I think you get down that path a long way before people realize kind of what the problem is.
Yeah. What's interesting about what you've shared is the one thing you haven't mentioned is like people are tired. Right.
Yeah.
So it's not,
Oh yeah.
but it's not like necessarily the sign is like, oh, I'm tired, I just need some more sleep. Like it's showing up as more psychological things that can have us really questioning other aspects outside of the fact that we're just burnt out. It can have us questioning, like, are we in the right role? Are we doing the right job? Are we worthy as a person? Like it's a psychological minefield, so to speak, that it feels like it's presented to us.
Well, and that's a great point. I think when I start to talk to my clients about recovery from burnout, and I think of this more like almost an addiction, like recovery from an addiction. Not that anyone's addicted to burnout, but this is a constant, everyday kind of process / battle. It's not a cure. It's not like you take a pill, boom, oh, I took my burnout, cure pill and I'm done. No, this is kind of a mindset and a shift in lifestyle and goals and those types of things. But I do think the physical and emotional fatigue that people get is unbelievable. And then that becomes, I think, part of this downward spiral that people get into. You're not sleeping well. So then your decision making is poor. Your nutrition is poor. You don't exercise. And then that just compounds and you feel worse the next day and worse the next day. And it becomes this downward spiral.
Yeah. Yeah. If you just joined us live, welcome to the show. I'm here with Dr. Jeff Moody, and we're speaking about all things burnout based on his new book that he's just recently written. I think launched in a few days' time. Is that right?
Yeah, Tuesday in America, the 29th, and worldwide, obviously, as well, available on Amazon. The Doctor is Burned Out, A Physician's Guide to Recovery.
Yeah. So we're speaking all things burnout and how burnout can actually be the silent killer, and not just within physicians, but also often within entrepreneurs as well. Like that strive and that hustle to forge our path and to make our own way can have some significant side effects. If you've got any questions, please make sure you put them into the chat wherever you are, and we'll get them through here and we'll get them answered in just a moment. Dr. Jeff, I'm curious to know, what are some signs that you're heading down that path? Because just hearing you speak more and more and more, I can look back at a number of times in my life and I'm like, shit, that was probably burnout. Like a number of businesses where I was angry, I was pissed off, nothing ever seemed to be right or good enough. I was super short-tempered, I was depressed, not giving a shit about the world. I thought it was just personal demons or struggles that I was going through. But looking back, I worked hard and I worked big hours, and my businesses consumed me.
And I do think that is where I think sometimes that's the mindset piece of this, where the way I kind of conceptualize this in the book and in general is that like your life is essentially a box that either you constructed by your own design or was kind of constructed around you based on some of the decisions you made or the agreements you said yes to or didn't say no to, so to speak. And so I feel like the floor is kind of your historical experiences, your life experiences. The walls are your physical, your spiritual, social, financial, mental kind of mindset type things, and your work environment. And then the ceiling is your limiting beliefs. And so kind of using that construct, I'm like, well, let's take the parts of your life that are causing those issues and fix those, and then build yourself a box of your choosing and your design, not one that just kind of got constructed around you. It's an insidious process. And I think once you start making those changes, it's, again, because it's multifactorial, it's like, let's attack one thing at a time. Or if you can do it to attack 3 or 4 things at a time, then you start having this upward spiral instead of the downward spiral that I think a lot of people get into with burnout. But again, you sound like you're like me. You're kind of like the angry, frustrated, kind of burned out person.
The hangry, frustrated, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Hangry, yeah. It's really interesting. Like I'm just, a lot of different thought bubbles are popping off as you're sharing today as well, because one thing you mentioned before, like my internet did just cut out for a second, but I got the last part around, like, it felt like, something being built around you versus you consciously building something. And I see that a lot with entrepreneurs, that they go into business to create some form of life for themselves they perceive is greater than what they've had. Whether it's like financial freedom, whether it's time freedom, whether it's to be there more for their family, whether it's just to forge their own path and make their own decisions. Yet, like so many of them, I reckon more than 95% of them get to a position where they end up unconsciously building themselves into a box. They start taking on board any and every type of work and clientele to pay the bills. And next minute you woke up one day and you realize this is not a business, this is a fucking prison. And I'm doing a life sentence right now.
Right. And you've kind of like, you've constructed this business that now is like your full-time and more than, double or triple full-time job. And I think because entrepreneurs are so driven, they're like, I'll just work harder and then it will be better.
Yeah.
And then
if I just do 2 more hours,
harder, it'll be better. And then surprisingly, like 6 months later and 1,000 hours later, it's not better. It's just kind of more of what you had before, but worse. And so that's why I really, one of the things we kind of joke with our clients about, I'm like, we're gonna, the real secret is we're gonna teach you how to build a new life, and the side effect is your burnout is gonna get better. Yeah. So like this isn't about like some magic thing to make your burnout better. This is making your life better, which then your burnout gets better. But you gotta start somewhere, I guess, is the way we talk about it.
It's so funny because I would never say that we've prescribed our clients as being burnt out. Like often many come to us that are in that trap we just spoke about, right? But one thing that we do is very much, there's a few things. Number one is what I've learned for myself, which I notice has worked time and time again now for our clients, is the moment that I start to feel overwhelmed, which honestly is not a lot these days, but it was a lot. And I found a way through. I would literally just write down everything that was in my head on a book, and I would close the book and I'd have the rest of the day off. I would spend the day in bed watching Netflix. I would go for a walk in nature. I would surf. I would walk away, because in the past, I'd be like, I've got all these things to do. I'll just work more. And I'd work till 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. And sure enough, the list kept growing. Whereas what I found is that going through that approach I just spoke about, writing them down, taking off, coming back, I'm then so focused and so clear on prioritizing and realizing that half the stuff I was trying to get done was not actually moving me close to where I want to go. It was not actually moving me close to a life or to a business of my dreams. It was simply keeping me busy, which I got confused with being productive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know how things are in Australia, but in America, when people are like, you see 2 people talking, they're like, how you doing? Like, how's it going? You're like, how you doing? And people used to say, I'm good. Now people say, I'm busy. Like, that's like the new good. And I've not really understood that, but I think exactly that mindset that you're talking about. People are like, well, I'm busy, so therefore I must be doing the right thing. I'm like, well, hang on. One of the exercises that I love to do with our clients is, I know I'm being successful when, and then write down a list of like 10 or 15 things. And the thing that I love about that is like, A, you really know what's important to you. And B, once you have that list, you're like, okay, I'm doing these 10 things. Like, I'm good. Like, you can ignore everything else. It is a great filter for getting your activities down to the things that only really matter to you. And
Yeah,
then
but you've got to break the status quo of being busy to
yeah,
get to that point of being productive.
yeah. And then you just do the things that you know make you successful, and you say no or ignore everything else. Just, I think you were probably doing that unconsciously with your list writing, and you're like, whew, it was like a brain dump, and you got rid of all the bad things. Then you're like, oh, I only have to do these 6 things, you know. And so
Yeah, it's. I think as a human race, you know, like we've really pushed or been pushed into that immediate gratification. Like everything is instant. Like everything you can get from your phone. Like in a matter of minutes, I can order anything from anywhere in the world and have it shipped and delivered here to Indonesia. We've forgotten how to be present. We've forgotten how to be relaxed. And one thing that we really instill in our clients is to focus on progress over perfection. Because I think most entrepreneurs, what kills their business and kills growth is trying to get things done perfectly. Yet the market is moving so quickly that if you wait till that product or service is perfect before launching, you've probably launched too late. Like, be okay to put it out there without its training wheels on and see what breaks, see what falls over, see what happens. And that indicates what should be fixed rather than getting it perfect. Because often perfect in our mind, like the clients won't even realize that extra level of service or quality that we put into it. So I think that focusing on progress over perfection can really help to eliminate this. And I want to come back to, there's a heap of questions here. I want to come back to, in a second of these questions, that point you mentioned about momentum. Because that to me, like feeling like you're actually moving towards, I want to come back to that. So let's just pin that there. If you're watching us live, welcome to the show. Please hit the like button. Let us know you're there. Post your questions. And I've got a couple of questions here. Mike from Sydney. Hey, Barry. Currently digesting the vision, mission, values chapter of The Path to Freedom. If you haven't got your copy yet, make sure you do. The Path to Freedom, the 9 steps to build a highly profitable and purpose-driven business that can work without you. Question for Dr. Jeff, not necessarily about burnout, asking about something interlinked with healthy visioning. But has he ever helped professionals moderate expectations about themselves and the career lifestyle they live in order to overcome burnout? This is what we're talking about, right?
That's a great question. The thing I feel like, well, if you back this up about 6 steps, I think a lot of people, their lives are run by either the mental paradigms they have or by like the agreements they've made, either overt agreements like, yes, I will be a doctor, or yes, I will marry this person, which, you know, a lot of times that's a nice agreement. But there are some of the agreements they may have said is like, well, I'll go live in this place where I don't want to live and work at this job that I don't want to work at for 5 years to make enough money, so then I can do what I want. I will, I will live where my wife wants to live, even though I despise that place. You know, those are some of the agreements that you make. And then as far as the paradigms, I think that run people's lives, like, everybody in my family is a doctor, so I'll be a doctor too, even though I have no interest in that and I hate it. I'm not a quitter. So even though I'm now through medical school, halfway through my 6-year training program, and I despise every second of it, I'm not a quitter. So I'm going to finish and become a doctor that I can't stand. So those are all mental models or mental decisions, agreements, paradigms that then run your life. And I think one of the things I work very hard on for me, and we work very hard on for our clients, is like, what do you want? What do you need? And is this what you're doing? Is that leading you to those things? Then once you have your why, then the how and the what become very easy. But if your why is leading you in the wrong direction, you can run as fast as you want, and you'll be going, 180 degrees from where you want to be instead of where you need to be. So
yeah, really, really great point. And I remember that Mark Mason's book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. There's a bit in there. There's a bit in there that really resonated for me, and it's the only line I can really remember the whole book. But it's like, are your goals actually your goals, or
are they somebody else's?
Are they somebody else's? Are they society's goals? And I was like, and I really had to question myself, and I realized these are not my goals. These are what I thought I should be chasing to be successful as an entrepreneur, to be successful as a business owner, to seek validation in the eyes of my parents. These are not my goals.
Right.
And that was a game changer when I started to get clear of what do I want and why do I actually want that? And what do I need?
And for me, my paradigm that was running my life for the last, the first 15 years before I became totally burnout was I have to be the most productive partner in my practice. So everything was designed around maximizing the amount of time I worked, taking extra call, doing, being the managing partner, running the business efficiently, our practice efficiently, all these things. And finally I was like, wait a minute, here I am, been working my butt off for 30 years. And finally I was like, you know what? I'm taking Fridays off. So I don't work on Friday anymore. And surprisingly, I'm about 95% as productive. And my mental health, and my wife and I both do it. She's a dermatologist. And we're like, we should have done this 15 years ago, and you're not a bad person if you do that. But that was all a mental construct that I had to be the most productive partner. And, and that actually took me a while to come to that conclusion and that discovery. So.
Yeah, I really want to, there's two more questions here. I really want to touch on again that momentum thing, because this again builds on what you're saying and taking that first step to valuing yourself enough to make a decision for you. And it's like that first step, it's like the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. That first step has the potential ability to create that uplift we're talking about. I want to come back to it, but the question from Keith from Melbourne, question for Dr. Moody. If it's all right with him, outside healthcare, what are the professions right now where he's finding professionals prone to burnout, and how have you advised them?
Oh, I'm speaking to a group of mortgage brokers, so home lender mortgage brokers, because I was talking to somebody and we were talking about this, and they said, will you come talk to our national association? Because 100% of mortgage brokers in the US are burned out now, because there's, the interest rates are low, and there's been this weird kind of super high demand for housing in the US right now for some reason, even though the economy is not great because of the virus. But and evidently the problem for mortgage brokers is they get paid X amount for their mortgages, the services they provide, but it's very time intensive, and so now the demand is super high, but they're not really it's not like they're making that much more money, and they're just all burned out. Accountants are extremely burned out. Lawyers are extremely burned out. I think other, kind of entrepreneur / professions but if you look overall, 40% of workers in the US are burned out, up from 25% 10 years ago. I always tell people always ask me well, so Dr. Moody, how do you cure burnout? I'm like, well, not a cure, but if you want three things you can do. Number one, define what is the thing in your life that makes your blood boil the most. Okay. Write that down. Number two, think of one thing. Just make that. Like I said, I'm a simple man. Think of one thing you can do to make that better. Okay. Number three, put a deadline on it. Behavioral science research says if you put a deadline on something, it triples the chances that it will actually get done. And then I guess finally, number four, take action. Take the action that you said you were going to do in step two and do it and see what the result is. And then again, that's where you start this momentum, getting back to momentum. It's once you see that improvement, then you're then I can do the next thing. So then you just start going down the list. For me, it was sleep. I was a horrible insomniac. I was sleeping 2 or 3 hours a night. And so then every day was just this angry fog that I was in because I didn't get good sleep, and I would make horrible decisions, and I was frustrated. And so I worked really hard on getting good sleep. And then I felt better and had better nutrition. Mm-hmm. And then I felt like working out, and then I was a nicer person, and then I made better decisions. And so, so again, you have to, and that's different for everybody. I think that's the point. Whatever your thing is, it's making, your blood boil the most. That's what you have to start with.
Yeah. Such amazing advice. And yeah, for me too, it's, there's a few key things that if I do them somewhat regularly, everything else is easy. It's, eating right, exercising regularly, sleeping, and meditating. And even sleeping, I notice, can go a bit by the wayside. But if I'm still exercising and eating healthy and meditating, they kind of compensate one another. Right. But, when I reach for the phone in the morning, and the first thing I do is open my phone, check emails, which is how it used to be. That's the way I set my day up. Whereas I find now it's the way that I spend my first half an hour or 2 hours of my day sets the whole entire day up for me. It's like, am I ruling over my day, or my day is ruling over me? Am I going out there and making decisions to work on me and
Right.
nourish me, or am I allowing the outside world to come in
Right.
and kind of deplete me of that?
Right. Are
Um,
you being active or reactive? You
yeah,
know,
outstanding. Yeah, absolutely. Another question about COVID. Sorry if this sounds trite, but has Dr. Chef ever encountered people who actually not only stopped worrying about COVID, but also found new areas for personal growth despite COVID? This is a question so close to my heart. And also, again, thanks, Keith and Mike, for your previous questions. Are fantastic.
So, you know, in America, there's some people who don't believe it's a hoax, and you know, they think it's not a real thing, and just because they don't know anyone who's had it. Two of my three kids have had it at college, and it's definitely a real thing. I think it affects the physical effects are variable, so that's why you know, the younger you are, the better you do. But when you start getting a little more senior, there's a higher chance of some significant issues. I think what it's like any other significant event that occurs in your life, you can let it control your life, or you can construct your life in a way that it's a part of your life, but it doesn't rule or dominate your life. You know, one thing that I did when this all started in March and April here in the US, I finally was like, you know what, I'm limiting my COVID news exposure to 10 minutes per day. I mean, initially, you know, we'd sit there for hours at a time
Yeah.
watching the news, and it was just like, you know, stressed, and you know, things are going horribly, and people are going to the ICU, and all these things. And when I started to go back to work, I was like, because I just happened to be off when it started to get bad, and when it came back, I was like, wow, I could get something that could kill me today at work. And you had a little bit of fear, but then as you kind of like figure out how to be safe and do those things, then I'm like, it's part of your life. And actually, my book launch was scheduled for May, and then we kind of like put it on hold because of COVID and some other things. But then finally, my publisher and I were like, you know what? That like people are more burned. Actually, studies show that the burnout rates have doubled or tripled in medicine and lots of places. So like, you have to get your book out. I'm like, you're
Yeah.
right. You know, in spite of everything else.
Yeah. It's it's interesting what you've shared. And I think it's like this, you go to Google and you Google poverty, right? Google's going to return you X amount of search results on poverty, right? If you go to Google and you Google abundance, Google's going to return you X amount of results on abundance. And the point I'm trying to make is both exist and they're always there. COVID is real, like it is there, and it is affecting, like people are dying from it, people are getting sick. Is it to the level that they're reporting on news? Maybe, maybe not, right? Regardless, it is there. I've had friends here in Bali who've had it. Bali's incredibly bad for it right now, yet I'm still going to the gym. I'm still training. I'm still going to cafes. I'm still catching up with friends. Like I've chosen I'm going to live my life regardless. And I remember when COVID first hit in March, the decision I made is I'll come through this better. I'll come through this better financially, physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. And that was the decision that I made. And therefore that then shaped the reality in the way that I took it on board. I wasn't playing this like spiritual bias, which is like, oh, like I'm so spiritual, COVID's not going to get me. Like that's bullshit thinking, right? The
Right.
reality is it's there, and it's good to be aware that it's there, but I'm not going to allow that to control my life, nor anything else that happens in the
Right.
world.
Right.
Like
All your responses and your decision making, all those things that, you know, and again, it's, I think if you acknowledge that there's risk and you take all the steps you can take personally to mitigate the risk. I'm like, it's like anything else. Like I could drive to work this morning and get hit by a bus. I mean, that risk is there every day for me as well. And so you do the things you can to mitigate that risk and live your life.
yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, I've had friends or family that I've seen just paralyzed by the fear.
Yeah.
I've seen business owners that have been paralyzed by the fear that now they haven't got businesses right now.
Right.
I've seen others that have had every reason to have like given up and given in. They've had their businesses shut down and they've chosen this is not going to beat me. This is not
Right.
going to go to top me. And because of that mentality, they've made different decisions and they've forged new paths through this and have grown despite the pandemic, so to speak.
There were
Um,
restaurants here in our town that were, you know, all, the restaurants were closed here for many months, except for takeout, and they pivoted to like 100% carry out takeout business, and they're more successful now than they were before.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Hopefully that answered your question. And thank you so much for asking. Dr. Moody, like, how can people connect in or get a copy of your book when it releases? And is there anything else you feel to share about the book?
Well, I mean, the thing I love about the book is, well, I think another little side issue with burnout is people don't want to acknowledge that they're burned out, and especially for physicians, like we can't be human. We can't, you know, say that we may have a problem. So the thing I like about the book is something where you can get it, you can, take the dust cover off and read it, in a in a newspaper. You can, it's something you can do in a private way on your own time. Do it at home. There'll be an audiobook coming out as well, and you can do it in a way that's efficient for you to help you get started on that path. Jeffmoody.com is my website. We have a lot of resources there. You can sign up for an email list, sign up for our YouTube live streams like this. This is awesome. And just my point always is, I just want people to get help, get the services that they need from wherever. If that's with me, great. If that's with you, Barry, great. I mean, I want people to reach out and get the services they have. And I think that's one of the problems with physicians is, I think if they're perceived as less than Superman or Superwoman, that that they need help, that people won't come to see them as a physician. And I'm like, you know what? Take the cape off. Let's not say that you're Superman. Everybody needs help, and then just avail yourself of the services that are out there from anyone. Yeah. And if that's me, great. If that's somebody else, great. And I'm trying to, with all of this, with these conversations here, I want to normalize the discussion around burnout and suicide, and that people acknowledge that it can happen. If it's happening to them, let's get help. Let's get you help.
Yeah. Look, I think it's a must read for every entrepreneur to have on their shelf, whether it's not just for awareness, for yourself to understand the signs and understand what's popping up. Because as I said, like me and like many I know, there was just no awareness there for what it was. It wasn't like it was avoidance. There just wasn't the awareness. But equally too, to notice when maybe you've got employees or loved ones around you that are potentially going through this process, and to have the tools to help them out as well. So, Dr. Moody, so grateful to have you on the show today. We'll put a link to your book and to your site below for those who'd like to get a copy of that. If you haven't yet got a copy of my book, The Path to Freedom, the 9 steps to build a highly profitable business that works without you, make sure you do that. Honestly, this is 18 years of my business life, and everything I put in here has afforded me the position where I live in Bali now. I surf every day, go to the gym. I don't get up to appointments in the morning. I don't have to work. My business runs without me. And I want that for you guys as well, because I believe that entrepreneurs have the ability to make the biggest impact in the world, far more than politicians and the governments. And, until you can build a business that's profitable and that can work with or without you, you're doing yourself and those around you a massive disjustice. So, Dr. Moody, grateful to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you all for your questions and comments and the love, and look forward to seeing you guys again on the next show real soon. Bye for now.